Hello, my dear listeners. Welcome to another episode of Afrotuk Agro TV, where we bring insightful topics that that enrich our farmers in knowledge, in experience, and also in productivity. I remain your host and agri expert, Koinsala Abajeside, and today we are going to look at an insightful topic that is really enriching and that is really posing a challenge to our farmers in Africa, in African countries, especially our smallholder farmers. Today, we are going to be looking at agricultural pesticide in Africa. As we all know, agricultural pesticide is mostly used and dependent on in our African communities in Africa, in Nigeria, in Congo, in other African countries. It is mostly dependent on, and which is why we have to look at these. And in this episode, we are going to be looking at the practices and the problems and the possibility that comes with use of agricultural pesticide. Also, we would also look at the type of chemicals that our farmers mostly use. We are going to look at how they assess them, as well as how the how the environmental and health concerns that come with the use of these pesticides. We are going to look at them in this episode. And what is the goal of this conversation is that we have to understand the current situation and the real challenges that comes with the use of pesticide in Africa. So let's dive right in. First of all, we are going to be looking at the common pesticides that is being used in Africa. The common pesticide that is being used for agriculture in Africa is cypermethrin, chlorpyrifos, and glyphosate, and also as mancozeb. And these pesticides are mostly used these pesticides are mostly used for maize, especially for maize, as well as for our cowpea production, especially vegetable, cotton, and cocoa farming, which is used to fight pests, weeds, and diseases. The reason why farmers use this weed, especially glyphosate and also glyphosate, which is mostly used for maize, is because they are being used to fight against pests that attack maize, as well as pests that attack our vegetables, especially tomatoes and some common vegetables that is being grown in Africa. This is why these pesticides are being used. And also, now we are going to look at how these pesticides are being assessed by our farmers. How are they assessed by our farmers? Now, most of our farmers, they rely on local agro dealers. For example, they just go to a market, maybe a general market in their surroundings, and they ask around themselves, okay, which pesticide are you using? Which one is more affordable? Which one is more affordable for you? And which one do you think is um, which one is more productive for you? Then when they get these as soon as they get this recommendation, they go and buy rather than them assessing it from experts. They just depend on their knowledge and they get these pesticide and they begin to use them. So most of them rely on their own maybe past agricultural knowledge or traditional knowledge or from their local agro dealers. They don't, some of them don't have expert knowledge or they don't rely on expert knowledge for these pesticide. Now, and this is very detrimental because most of these most of these local agro dealers are unlicensed and untrained. They just rely on knowledge, on their accumulated knowledge, okay, try and error knowledge. Most of them are unlicensed, and most of these pesticides they buy may be expired. They may be expired or unlabeled or counterfeit, which is posing risks to farmers and consumers. These will most likely pose risks to farmers and consumers that are eating these agricultural produce. Now, let's look at this. Do farmers that are using this pesticide, do they really have accurate knowledge of the pesticide they are using? No. In all honesty, most farmers are not adequately trained. They are not experienced. They are experienced, quite all right, yes, but they are not adequately trained, and which is why they do try and error. Maybe for these agricultural window, they use a pesticide and they see that okay, this one is not so good. For the next agricultural production window, they use another one. And like that, they don't know the effect of these try and error on the plant, on the soil, and also on the consumer itself. So, which is why it is very important for us to look at this topic and do justice to it, that most farmers are not adequately experienced, and we have to ensure that we treat this topic with utmost importance. Now, let's look at some of these farmers, they just mix the pesticide. They mix the pesticide, and most of them, they ignore the instructions from the producer, the before instruction and after instruction. They ignore them, which is why it is the continuous use of pesticide like this is very detrimental to the crop, to the soil, and also to the human being consuming them. Even most of them, they don't take necessary precautions in applying these pesticides, which on the long run affects farmers' health. Because when you use this pesticide without taking the necessary precautions, you expose yourself to these chemical chemical problems. And when you expose yourself to this chemical problem, it affects your overall health and well-being. So that is why we have to treat this topic. Now, let's talk about the sustainability and health content of these applications, of this pesticide use. We are looking at the sustainability and the health content of these pesticide use. Now, how do agricultural chemicals affect our soil and water resources? First of all, pesticides they don't only kill pests. That is one fact I want you to know. Pesticide, they don't only kill pests. Pesticides do more than killing pests, which is why we have to look at them carefully. We have to assess them carefully. Pesticide also kills beneficial organisms in the soil, which on the long run affect the biodiversity of the soil and expose the soil to more harm. Which is why we know that pesticides don't only affect the soil, they affect the overall health of the soil as well. And they kill beneficial organisms. For example, there are some organisms that are beneficial to the soil health. And when farmers use pesticide without careful consideration, they in turn kill these beneficial organisms in the soil, and it affects it. So this is why farmers need to look at it carefully before applying this pesticide into the soil. And also, this pesticide, over time, they reduce soil fertility, because after the pesticide has been applied and they kill beneficial organisms in the soil, they over time affect soil fertility, thereby leading to soil degradation. And which is why we are looking at this topic. Also, when it rains, this, for example, maybe farmers apply these chemicals onto the plant, this pesticide onto the plant, and it rains. The rainwater will wash these chemicals into the river or into the groundwater. Thereby, it mixes with the river and it affects the river organisms, like the fishes in the river, or and it maybe gets into the water that human being drink, which affects it and contaminates it. More than 60% of the water more than 60% of the water around where pesticides are used are contaminated, which is going to affect the human health, because when human drink this water, when they drink this water, when human beings drink this water, it affects their overall health, which is why we have to make careful consideration of how these agricultural chemicals are being used, because they don't only affect the plants, they in turn affect the agricultural organisms, thereby, and they affect the beneficial organism in the soil. They affect the overall health of the soil, and also when they run into the water, they affect drinking water of the people. Now, this is very dangerous in wetland farming zones, especially in the southwest area, where the rain is most consistent. Rain will consistently wash these chemicals into the river, or into the groundwater, and it in turn affects human health. Now, what are the health risks that excessive use of chemicals poses to humans? First of all, it brings about skin problem, actually skin problem, because some of these chemicals, they pose risks to skin, because when farmers are in direct contact with these chemicals, it affects their skin over time. They might not see it in a year or two, but in long term, 5 years to come, they begin to see the effect, and they might not even be able to trace it unless they do deep tests. That's when they are able to see the effects and the damages that these excessive pesticide use poses to their health. Also, another major health challenges is respiratory diseases. A lot of farmers have a lot of proven by studies, they have respiratory diseases, which is due to the excessive use of pesticide, or excessive and unregulated use of pesticide. These in turn affect their health. Especially their respiratory diseases, even cancer. Now, we are seeing a lot of issues from respiratory cancer, prostate cancer. These can be linked to excessive use of chemicals by these farmers. And also, it might not even be farmers alone. People that are consuming these pesticide products, this in turn exposes them more to risks of skin cancer, respiratory cancer, and respiratory diseases, and also cancer. And this needs to be addressed so that we can reduce the risk that this use of pesticide poses on our human health and also sustainability. Because when human health is being threatened, it affects the sustainability of agricultural production, sustainability of our water use, and also our soil health. Then also, now, what are the issues in Africa regarding pest resistance to pesticide? Now, when pesticides are being used or overused or misused, pests become resistant to them. And farmers have to maybe double their dosage or maybe try to change the pesticide they use, which therefore causes more harm than good. So farmers have to, because of this pest resistance to pesticide, they in turn they increase the cost of production, because when farmers are trying to change every production window, they change the pesticide they use. It increases their cost of production. And if it doesn't increase their cost of production, it increases and it also exposes farmers' health to this overuse of chemicals and misuse of chemicals. And also, because farmers want to get results on their agricultural production, they tend to ignore the post-use of this pesticide. They tend to ignore the after-use effects of this pesticide. They tend to ignore the aftermath effects of the use of this chemical, which is very dangerous. Now, we've come to the end of this first part of this agricultural pesticide use in Africa. We've been able to look at the most common used pesticide, as well as how farmers assess these chemicals, as well as how these chemicals poses challenges and how they poses problem to human health, soil health, and also the overall sustainability and health of farmers and consumers. Now, stay tuned for the second part, where we are going to look at the real practical issues and how farmers can access good and safe pesticide knowledge. And also, we are going to train our farmers on good and safe use of this pesticide, how they can access good knowledge and adequate knowledge about it. And now we are moving this conversation to solutions. We are going to look at the solutions that some of our farmers have been able to come up with in use of this agricultural pesticide, as well as the problems and the challenges that they are facing in adopting some of these safe solutions on this sustainable solution, as well as the agricultural policies that are supporting or that are hindering these adoption of these solutions. Now, let's look at some of these conversations, and thank you for joining in once again. Now, first of all, we are going to look at some of the alternative and natural methods that our farmers have been able to use in respect to these agriculture chemicals. Some of our farmers are very smart, so they came up with some solutions which include neem. I could remember when I was also an agricultural intern, and we were able to make this neem agricultural chemical. We were able to produce it and also use it on our farm. Yes, it was productive, but not to a large extent. We still saw some deficit in the use of it, which I could understand that a lot of farmers are facing this, because using these on a large scale or without proper analyzing of the pests, as well as the problem, as well as the effects that we want to see, the results we want to see. So using of neem is productive, but on a large scale, which a lot of farmers wants to go or wants to use it, is not sustainable. And which is why this is not so adopted amongst our farmers. Also, some of our farmers use chili and garlic solutions, which is gaining traction nowadays, which is gaining popularity. For example, using of neem solutions, chili pepper and garlic solutions are used as pesticide, as organic pesticide. Are they effective to a large extent? Yes. Actually, are they effective to a large extent? Yes, but on a large scale, they are not so effective. For example, countries like Uganda, Kenya, and South Africa are making strides in the use of this organic pesticide. But on a large scale, in all our African countries, the adoption is still low. Adoption of this organic pesticide is still low. For example, we can see that because some of these solutions, they are effective, yes, maybe for 1 acre, but for large acre production of this, for large acres, is still, you might not know the right amount of pesticide, you might not know the large amount of organic neem leaf to produce, or the chili pepper to use. They are affordable, yes, but on how to use them, on how to produce them on large extent for full-scale organic farming is still low, because farmers don't have the right knowledge on how to make the proportion and how to make use of it properly. Now, let's take a look at why this is still low. Because due to lack of awareness, a lot of farmers are not aware of this organic use, of neem, chili pepper, or garlic solutions. Some farmers are not aware. Also, market access. For example, market access of this organic of neem, garlic, and chili pepper. For example, in some areas, they don't have access to them. And even when they have access to them, it's a bit costly for them to access. So they prefer to use maybe a chemical that is being company-based, that is easily accessible to them. It's not like it is cheap, but they feel like, okay, for this, I can make use of it on a large scale, rather than buying the organic produce that is safe, but it is not easily accessible. Then also technical knowledge. For example, maybe when they see that, okay, for this small scale, they have a technical knowledge about it. But for a large scale, like 2 acres, 5 acres, they don't have the right knowledge for it. So this is kind of difficult for them to make use of. So these are the organic farming method and biological control for farmers in Africa. Now, are there locally developed natural pesticide solutions? Are there locally developed natural pesticide solutions? These are the questions that farmers are asking. And yes, absolutely yes, there are locally developed natural solutions in Africa. For example, neem leaves, pepper, chili pepper, garlic, and papaya seeds are being used to make natural pest repellents. They are being used to make natural pest repellent. And farmers in various parts of Africa use this. And also we have international organizations, we have agricultural organizations that are producing these for farmers to use. Yes, they are available. For example, we have research centers like IITA. This is in Nigeria and other African countries. They have IITA research centers like IITA that are producing these natural and safe natural pest repellents. And these pesticide solutions that are made from neem, garlic pepper, chili pepper, and papaya leaves, they are cheap, they are safe, and they are environmentally friendly. So we have research centers like IITA in Nigeria and in other African countries that are producing this for farmers to access and use on their farms. Now, what other sustainable solutions can be implemented? What other sustainable solutions can be implemented to reduce pesticide chemical use in farming? What other sustainable solutions? Now, our effort, our target in this program is to make use of sustainable farming, is to adopt sustainable farming, which is why we are looking at sustainable solutions that can reduce chemical pesticide use in agriculture. One of them is IPM. IPM full meaning is integrated pest management, which involve combining cultural, biological, and chemical methods. It is not just using only chemicals. We are going to use cultural. For example, maybe cultural methods like setting up nets around our farm, setting up nets to prevent maybe some pests that are wind transmitted. If we use greenhouses, these pests that are transmitted by wind won't be able to affect our plants. So when we combine cultural methods and chemical method, as well as some traditional methods, these are sustainable solutions. These are sustainable solutions that can help reduce only chemical pesticides use in agriculture. Another sustainable solution is crop rotation and intercropping to break pest cycles. For example, maybe if you continue using monocropping, the pests that affect this first cycle of production will affect the subsequent cycle. But when we practice crop rotation and intercropping, the pests that affect this crop won't be able to affect the next crop. Thereby, we are breaking the pest cycle. And also, this will help to reduce the dependency on chemical pesticide use in agriculture. So farmers can adopt crop rotation. It is cheap, it is affordable, and it is accessible. So farmers can adopt crop rotation and intercropping to break pest cycle. Farmers can adopt crop rotation and intercropping to break pest cycle. Also, promoting resistant seed varieties. Now, research institutes like IITA are coming up with uh, pest resistant seed varieties. Farmers can access these seed varieties farmers can plant these seeds, and when they plant this seed, pests won't be able to affect these seeds, and therefore farmers won't have the need to use chemical pesticide, because pests won't be able to affect these agricultural production these seeds, because they are resistant. These seeds are resistant to pests. So when farmers plant seed varieties that are resistant to pests, they are able to avoid, if not completely, drastically, the use of chemical pesticide. Also, when we educate farmers on threshold spraying, means when they spray only and when it is necessary. When we educate farmers on these can bring about sustainable use of pesticide in agriculture. Now, what are the economic and political perspective to pesticide use? What are the economic and political perspective to pesticide use? Now, for example, especially in Nigeria, we have an organization that regulates pesticide use, like NAFDAC. They regulate the use of drugs and chemicals in the country. And these are some of the perspectives to pesticide use. And they regulate pesticide use in Nigeria, and we have other institutions like that in our other African countries. But yes, they are existing, but the enforcement is weak, because we have organizations that will try to boycott the regulations of these institutions, because maybe they want to improve the sales of their chemicals. They tend to boycott these NAFDAC regulations. So enforcement of these use is very weak. The enforcement is very weak. Also, we have some policies that support organic farming, but their incentives are still low. Their PR, their public relations is still low, because most of these farmers are not aware of this organic pesticide, because the use of this organic pesticide is still low, because their incentive is still low. The large scale of production is still not supported. which is still not supported, which is why their incentives are still low. And this in turn affects the popularity of these organic pesticides. Also, long-term economic benefits from reduced impact costs and health risk. Yeah, on a long term, yes, short term, the economic benefit is still low, but on a long term, the economic benefit is much. So, which is why government and policies has to support the use of these organic pesticides. Now, let's take a look at the policies and economic transitions of these sustainable pesticide method. Let's take a look at the agricultural policies that are supporting the transition of this sustainable pesticide method. Now, in the past, there are not enough policies to support the shift to sustainable pesticide use. There are not enough support, but currently, nowadays, due to the rising in the attention to sustainable farming, we are seeing progress in support to sustainable pesticide use. We are seeing progress, which is why there are some policies that are supporting these methods. Policies that are promoting organic farming, agroecology, and IPM, they are now being evident in our national policies, in our national agricultural policies, which is why we are looking at this topic. But implementation of these policies is still low. That is the mere truth. Yes, there are progress. We are seeing progress in our House of Assemblies towards this support, towards this policy support to pesticide use, but the implementation is still low, which is why over 60% of our farmers are still dependent on chemical pesticide use, because the implementation of the sustainable solution is still very low. And what can we do to avoid this is why we are bringing about this awareness that government and policy officials should ensure that it is not only to include these policies in agricultural policies, but also to ensure and enforce implementation. We have to enforce implementations. Now, what are the problems that farmers face in transitioning to sustainable pesticide practices? What are the problems that farmers face in transitioning to sustainable pesticide practice? Or can they even transition to it? Yes, they can transition, but it is not easy. It is not easy to completely transition to this organic and low chemical farming, because it takes time. It takes time, takes training, takes a lot of incentive and support, takes a lot of technical knowledge, and it is difficult for farmers to access, especially small-scale farmers. It is difficult for them to access this on their own. It is very difficult for farmers to access this on their own, which is why we, policies officials, government officials has to support our farmers in subsidy, to give them subsidy, give them loans, give them education, give them incentives. For example, if you tell a farmer that if they use this organic pesticide, they would have this so and so incentive. It would motivate farmers to make use of these sustainable practices. But because there are no incentives, there are no subsidies to promote the use and the adoption of these organic and sustainable solutions, it is difficult. It is difficult for farmers to completely embrace organic and low pesticide use. And also, but in the good news is that in the long run, farmers can save money, access premium market, and farmers can save money and access premium and save agricultural production if they adopt these sustainable practices. But government and private organizations and research organizations has to support our farmers in adopting and completely embracing these sustainable practices. Now, we are going to look at some of the trainings that extension agent or organizations that educate farmers needs to look at, and also experiences that farmers need support on. For example, farmers need how to identify pests correctly. Also, they need how to safe mix and correctly use pesticide. Also, farmers need to understand the natural alternatives for chemical pesticide use. And also, farmers also need to understand the labels and safety symbols for chemical use. The farmers need to be trained in all these areas regarding pesticide use. And also, they also need to know how to properly store and dispose chemicals. These are areas that farmers, especially small-scale farmers, rural farmers, need to be educated on. And as time goes on this channel, we are going to talk about these educations, especially maybe how to understand symbols, how to identify pests, how to correctly administer this pesticide, and how to properly dispose them. We are going to take a look at them in subsequent times. Now, what are the common mistakes that farmers use? What are the common mistakes that farmers use, and what are the precautions that farmers can make use when they are making use of chemicals? For example, farmers overdose and mixing of chemicals, different chemicals, spraying in windy conditions, not using protective gear, reusing pesticide containers for water or food, and also spraying too close to harvest time. These are very detrimental to farmers' health and consumers' health. And farmers need to avoid these mistakes carefully. And also, what are the solutions? What are the precautions that farmers should make use of when they are administering pesticide use? Farmers should always read instructions. A lot of people are guilty of this. They should always read instructions. They should wear gloves and masks. They should avoid spraying when it is windy or during high sun. They should keep pesticide away from children and water sources. They should never eat or smoke while spraying, and they should safely dispose containers, never burn or reuse. They should safely dispose them. They are safety disposal centers. So farmers should know these safety areas and dispose them adequately. They should not, farmers should not never burn or reuse them. They should dispose them in, they should safely dispose these containers in government disposal areas, not burn or reuse them. Now, we've come to the end of our program today. We've been able to look at the problems that comes with the use of pesticide that farmers, we've come to see some of the common mistakes that farmers make when they are using pesticide. We've also taken a look at the precautions, and we've also seen the reason why farmers cannot fully adopt organic and sustainable pesticide application for their farm, and also why policies and why policy implementation needs to be enforced for pesticide use. Thank you so much for listening. And also, if you are an agricultural expert out there and you need to come on this platform to talk to farmers on some major agricultural knowledge and education that farmers needs to be aware of. If you have anything to share, you can contact us through the WhatsApp number on the screen, and we would love to have you on this program as an expert to share your knowledge as an expert to our farmers out there. Thank you so much for listening, and have a wonderful time and stay safe.